So I'm a huge Captain Marvel fan. Probably my favorite superhero of all time. This is a CGC graded comic. It's a 9.2 from 1945. Crowley was the publisher at the time. He would keep these comics, and this is one of the comics from his collection. So I actually have dozens of these. These are all nicely sealed to preserve them for the future. But the point is that I'm a huge Captain Marvel fan, and I put my money where my mouth is. I've invested more in Captain Marvel than every other comic character combined. So here's the Shazam movie, um, and I enjoyed it for the most part. I would say I liked a lot more than what I disliked. There were some things that I didn't think were perfect, but overall, I thought it was a fun experience. Went and saw the movie in the theater. And so, cut forward to nowadays, to this year, they released in March Shazam Fury of the Gods. And when I saw the preview for it, I was just like, oh, that's not what I was hoping for. And when I read the plot, it just wasn't exciting to me at all. Um, so it came out. I did not go see it at the theater. Mostly the nail in the coffin was the fact that the ratings were not very good on it. The word of mouth was not very good. This movie here, Shazam, got a Rotten Tomato score of 90. The new one got a Rotten Tomato score of 49. So that's almost half. And so I was like, okay, I'm just going to wait. And I would have. I hadn't pre-ordered it, but I had it in my Amazon shopping cart, the 4K version of Fury of the Gods. So I was like, well, I'll watch it eventually. Um, but it was not until my flight from that long flight from Singapore to San Fran that I sat down and watched it in my seat. So it wasn't exactly the greatest of experience, but so it starts off and by the way, I think the 46 was an absolute, 49% was an absolutely deserved score, and possibly even higher than it deserved. It starts off with a theft in a museum. We discover that the thieves, who are dressed sort of like centurions, are Hespera and Calypso, the daughters of Atlas, and they are goddesses, played by the 78-year-old Helen Mirren and the 54-year-old Lucy Liu. So those are the villains of the story in this particular movie. Captain Marvel has lots of villains, and they are not two of them. So they decided to make some new ones. Now, they had teased in the previous movie that we would be seeing Mr. Mind. No, Mr. Mind does not appear. There were some things in the movie that I did think were good decisions. One of them was that Grace Fulton, who played Mary Brumfeld, something like that. She now also plays the super version, and that was one of the things I actually complained about in this particular movie, is that why? Well, I know that all the kids, when they transformed, were played by different actors because they were now adults. But Mary was a full-grown adult, or Grace Fulton was a full-grown adult, and it seemed weird to bring in a different actress. But they didn't do that this time, and I thought that was a very good decision. So I was happy to see that, and there is a reason why they did that, and other than the fact that it just made more sense, and I'll bring that up in just a second. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but Jimon Honso, who plays Wizard Shazam. He's got a much larger role, even though he died in the original one. But that's fine because in the comics he comes back. He has a much larger role, and I think that was a really good decision because he does have a great screen presence. So I was happy to see more of him. Maybe they went a little overboard because it kind of took away a bit of his gravitas by having him in the movie that much, and he did sometimes get to be a little bit of a comic character, and I'm talking like comical, and not that bad, but it was. I didn't love all the usage of him, but I did like to see him in there more. So I think that The main problem with the movie is that it's as if the director and the writer did not understand what it was that made the first movie so likable. It was the discovery of his powers. It was the relationship between Billy and Freddie. Um, I think that the weakest parts of the movie were the fights at the end with the seven deadly sins. For me, it was just the fun, when he's sitting there shooting lightning in the air for money. That was fun. Those were funny, and you don't really get that this time. There's lots of jokes. There's a lot of lighthearted stuff, but he's not doing that anymore. Now he's just like, okay, I'm Captain, well, Shazam. Um, and we don't get any more exploration anymore. And here's one interesting thing, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, but the actors who play the kids, including Asher Angel, barely appears in the movie because he's almost always Captain Marvel at this point. Uh, and I think that one of the reasons is because Asher Angel is now 20 years old. He's not a kid. And one of the issues I had in the original movie was the fact that uh, Billy Batson was not that young. And he also, because of his life, he was kind of cynical, a bit hard edged. And Captain Marvel was like, oh gosh, gee willikers. And I'm like, well, that doesn't seem like the same character. And he seemed like he was more immature than Billy. Billy wasn't particularly immature, but Captain Marvel was. So I was like, well, why? And now, why is he still so immature? Because Billy's now 20 years old, an adult. You would think that he'd be acting like an adult now. And it certainly makes the continuation of the series, at least with Asher Angel, pretty much impossible because now he's just simply too old to play uh, Billy Batson. Even in this movie, he kind of was. Um, I just, I think one of the main problems was, I suspect. Well, okay, let me back up a bit. So this original movie grossed $367 million. Now this was pre-COVID, but that's not an amazing number. That's for a superhero movie. That's not that fantastic. It definitely made money, but that's not a huge amount. Um, the Fury of the Gods made 133 million on a budget of around 90 to 100 million. That's death. I don't think we're gonna ever see another Captain Marvel movie. I think that killed it, and I suspect that part of the reason is the low Rotten Tomato score. Part of the reason is kind of the post-COVID slump, and I think part of the reason is because people like myself looked at the preview and they saw Captain Marvel fighting the 78-year-old Helen Mirren, who is a fantastic actress. But really, is that what we want to see? We want to see him fighting the 54-year-old Lucy Liu? Um, from a visual standpoint, I don't know that it's exciting people. Something caused the movie not to do well. And I think that if fans like myself aren't going to see it, then I think that is not a good sign. Now, the I think the biggest problem for me in the movie was that, so we get to the point where it's the climax, and every one of these movies has to have a massive CGI battle. Okay, in this case, it's I'm going to do some spoilers. So it's basically Calypso, Lucy Liu flying around on this fear dragon, and they've also planted this golden apple that is destroying Fawcett City, releasing minotaurs and all sorts of mythical creatures and killing people. And that's the other thing is these movies, the tone seems to be a little problematic because there's a lot of lighthearted stuff and jokes, and then you have a lot of death, and it's a little strange. So we have the climax, and I look at the clock, And there's an hour left in the movie, and I'm like, is this fight seriously going to be an hour? Yeah, yeah, it really was. And we get to sort of the climax of the climax, and I'm looking, and it's about 30 minutes left, and I'm like, oh my God, this is not what I wanted. I wanted, because what it is that sets Captain Marvel apart from other superheroes, that was not what they were capitalizing on. There was some fun parts. Most of the kids now are almost always in their superhero roles, and I think that's probably why Grace Fulton plays herself as her super version, because she's that version almost the entire time. So why not leverage the actress and have her play herself, or play both characters? So this is when I'm going to get in. Well, okay, there was one part that I also did like. So there was a 1970s version of the Shazam show, and Billy Batson was played by an actor named Michael Gray, who's now much older. He was in one of the scenes in here where Captain Marvel is getting knocked around, and they're still playing the joke of, what do we call him? What's his name? And Michael Gray, who I could recognize, even though he's way older, and he's kind of wearing the Billy Batson red shirt, and he says, "Get him, Captain Marvel." And I'm like, oh, he actually said the name. So they did call him Captain Marvel at one point, or at least Michael Gray did. And okay, this is where I'm going to get into the big spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, then don't listen. Captain Marvel dies at the end, and he died exactly the same way as Superman died, and visually the same. He has the spear. He's flying at the dragon. Even the blur effect is exactly the same. And there's an explosion, and he dies. And I'm like, oh my God, are they seriously going to do this? So they bury him immediately, and then somebody says something about all the gods are dead, and Wonder Woman shows up. Not all of them. And I don't know if she's actually considered a goddess. Maybe she is. I think she's a demigoddess or whatever. But and I can't even remember what she does, but she brings him back to life. He bursts from his, or punches his fist through the top of the grave, and he's like, "Oh, you buried me so quickly," and I was just like, "Oh, this is so stupid. This is just dumb to kill him and then bring him back immediately." And I found Gal Gadot's appearance in here just cringeworthy. I didn't really like the way it was handled. I think it could have been handled differently. Overall, I thought it was boring. I thought the jokes, very few of them landed. There were some jokes. I kind of enjoyed the relationship between old Shazam and Freddy. But overall, I just found it boring. And I found the Helen Mirren in CGI fighting mode kicking Captain Marvel just stupid. And I can't remember who. Somebody grabs Helen Mirren Hespera and just slams her to the ground, to the concrete. And kind of like the way Hulk did with Loki, and it was dumb. And they capture her, but it turns out, oh, she wanted to be captured, which is such an overused plot device. And I totally intended on getting the movie to own it, but now I'm like, why? Do I want to even watch it again? Not really. Do I think there's going to be another movie? No, not at all. I can't imagine that they're going to make another movie. Even if they just say, okay, forget the build-up, because they're building up to Captain Marvel versus Black Adam, and Black Adam also did poorly. Did not this poorly, but was a disappointment. Even if, let's say they say, okay, we're going to, let's say in this movie, they said, forget, doing any more build-up. We're going to have Black Adam versus Captain Marvel. Do I think it would have been a much better movie? I don't know. I'm not even sure I really care about watching those two battle it out. I'm not even sure what it would, just two Superman-level creatures or beings duking it out. I don't really care about that. I would have liked to have seen, I was interested in what they might do with Mr. Mind. There's King Kull, there's Mr. Adam, there's all sorts of villains they could have used. Instead, they used the daughters of Atlas. So, yeah, overall, Fury of the Gods, as a huge Captain Marvel fan, I'll say I give it a definite thumbs down. I did not enjoy the movie. I got through it. There were parts I enjoyed, but overall, particularly once we got to the big fight at the end, which was an hour long, I just was losing interest. And I just was like, all right, I'm just going to finish this so that, I'll have seen the whole thing. But anyway, that basically is my opinions, my thoughts on Shazam, Fury of the Gods.